first next-gen release for 2014 was one we were really looking forward to, and it was Thief from Eidos Montreal and Square Enix. Sad to say that we were a little bit disappointed with it, but it's still a pretty decent game.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem we've got here is that, Garrett's been away for a decade. He's been, hiding in the shadows somewhere, and in that time, other competitions emerged for, king of the stealth genre and king of that first-person stealth game, and obviously the big one is Dishonored. Dishonored took so much inspiration from Thief, channeled it into its own Victorian-era game, and, we love Dishonored here. And Thief has come back, and it just sort of feels a little bit restricted by its sort of determination to pay homage to what's come before.
There's been a bit of a discussion really for us of whether or not this is really a stealth game or more of a thieving simulator. There is a kind of a slight kind of contrast there of, can you be both of those things, or do you have to lean one way or the other? Thief, I feel, does lean more towards trying to be a good thief game, that sort of pickpocketing, working your way into safes and that kind of thing. Maybe it loses a little bit of the stealth because of that.
Yeah, it's such a tough one with this version of Thief, because you know what, it visually looks great. It's a very, very pretty game. But it just struggles with trying to find a balance between old Thief and new game direction. So, the old Thief games classically would be quite open in their approach, almost like a Hitman. There was multiple sort of ways to tackle objectives. This one has a tendency to fall into the sort of almost Call of Duty follow the man syndrome, where you'll get into an environment and there's really only one direction you can push forward. Sure, there's a little sort of path you can jump off and you can explore and maybe find extra hidden loot. But a lot of the time, you really are just being channeled down towards these objectives, and it just wasn't what we were hoping for or expecting from this next-gen reboot of Thief. And I think it's just one of those problems of an old franchise coming back is how much do you want to appease those old players and how much do you want to deliver an experience that's satisfying to people that just may never have played the original ones.
It's interesting to just bring up there the idea that somehow it's sort of channeling you into certain options and kind of leading you by the hand every now and again. It's been interesting hearing other people's experiences of the game and the things that they've found that others haven't. There's certainly a degree to which it makes you think that there's a linear path sometimes, and in actuality there are lots of options and you don't realise items you didn't know that were there, characters that you might be able to interact with and you didn't know about. So it's a game that does reward exploration and experimentation, but it's so punishing sometimes if you dare to explore, dare to step out of what seems like the safe zone of the game, that it can discourage you from trying, and that's a bit of an issue. But there are certain things that kind of hint at what the game's trying to do. For instance, there's an achievement for taking more than 15 hours to complete the game. Now that in itself is kind of odd. I mean, an achievement for taking longer than you need to seems like the very opposite of everything that games have been doing over the last 15 years. But it does sort of suggest it wants you to be methodical, it wants you to take your time, it wants you to explore every inch of every stage that you play. So that's interesting. I think it also has a great attention to detail in certain areas.
Totally. There's a lot of room to improve, and there's a lot of things Thief did right. I think a lot of the mechanics are sort of almost perfect in their execution. As said, Garrett, you really do get into his mindset. His voice actor is really, really good, and to be honest, a lot of his dialogue's very witty and very funny, especially, which is engaging, especially when everything else in the world is so drab and depressing. The city's like dying from a plague, and it's like, oh god. But you know what? He's really fun, and I'd like to see Eidos sort of take some of the feedback that's been directed at it, maybe look at some of the other games in the franchise, and even look towards things like Hitman and Dishonored in terms of what stealth games are currently doing, and take those ideas and push it into Thief 2 or Thief 5, I guess it would be, and just experiment a bit, have some fun with it. It just feels so restrained by what's come before, and really, we're in a time of just innovation and passion across the industry. It just feels like it's lacking in that, to be honest.
It's certainly a good return, a solid kind of new beginning for this series. It needs a bit of work, but we're sort of hopeful for what's going to come next. Overall, we've given this one a 7 out of 10.